All right. I'm going to talk about diesel oils. And I'm going to refer to the screen here, a rare thing. But see, you don't really see the screen that well in the video. But you see up here we have a family of oils. And every one of them has a place. We have the OE diesel oil, we have the 5W30 HDD, the ACD 30-weight oil over here, and we have the new CJ4 oils and the old standby CI4 Plus 1540 heavy-duty diesel and marine. Although I always like having multiple products, I must tell you that we're starting to have some problems. And I'll give you one that came up to me this last week, which is everything's fine, everybody did what they're supposed to do, and a catastrophe took place. We had a customer who had an older Dodge Cummins diesel. And he ran AMSOIL, he was happier than he could be. Bought himself a new 6.7 Dodge.
Oops.
Figured I'd just keep running AMSOIL, and so he kept running HDD, because that's the best, right?
Turned it up, didn't he?
Well, it did catch up with him, because what happened is he, at 18,000 miles, he had a partial seize of the engine.
Oops.
And when he took it to the dealership, and they opened it up, the bottom of the pan was just full of sludge. Now, it's not unexpected that you would find that using HDD CI4 Plus oil in a new 6.7 Dodge turbo diesel. The reason is this: the old truck did not have exhaust gas recirculation nor a particulate filter in the exhaust. The new truck, to meet the higher requirements of pollution control, has a particulate filter in the exhaust, and it has an EGR system on the truck to adjust the temperature of the cylinders to reduce the nitrous oxide. So, what happened here was, out of all straightforward, hey, that's a diesel, this is a high performance diesel synthetic engine oil, it ought to work as good as this one as it working that one. So let's take a minute and describe what's going on in these new turbo diesels so that we all understand it, and anytime we're taking a reorder from somebody that calls us and says, hey, I just need to get some more of that HDD or some more of that AME, we have to ask, are you driving the same truck? Have you changed trucks? What's the year and make of your truck? All right? And here's why. When the EPA, in all of their manifest knowledge, decided that they were going to reduce the ash particulate that comes out of the diesel, it's very fine. You can't even tell it in most of these trucks. But we can tell it when one's really poorly tuned and you see the big black cloud come out the back when they step on the gas or step on the accelerator. Yeah, and that means all that soot's coming out the tail end, right? So they decided to put a stop to diesel soot. To do that, they put a very fine particulate filter in the exhaust system after the muffler, before the exhaust would go out the tailpipe. Now that particulate filter works well. It's just a series of very fine mesh, if you will, of wire that's in it. There's some alloy, probably some alloy of stainless steel or something in there.
With sensors.
And so what happens is, this thing collects all this carbon buildup. It reaches a point at which the back pressure in the exhaust system tells the computer system that the particulate filter has all the carbon that it can hold. So that then tells the computer to go into a regeneration cycle, it's called, for that filter. Now, unfortunately, the way that's designed into these Power Strokes, Cummins, and Duramax engines during this particular 2007 to 2011 models, they simply overfuel the engine with excessive diesel so that it will go through the engine into the exhaust, and when it hits the particulate filter, it will burn it out like a Roman candle and burn all that carbon out. And as soon as the back pressure in the exhaust begins to drop, it stops the evolution. Now here's the problem with that. When it does this, it washes down diesel past the rings in the cylinder and usually contaminates the crankcase oil with a quart or more of diesel, many times running between 10 and maybe 13% fuel contamination in the oil. So, the best that you can do with this is to have a very high quality oil that will resist breaking down from fuel contamination. Now, as the engine runs, all of these engines are hot, and the light weight of the diesel will eventually vaporize out of the engine. And they all, by the way, have now a crankcase ventilation system which collects the vapor in the crankcase and throws it back into burn it, like a gasoline car. So eventually that vapor begins to disappear, and the oil comes back up in shape. In fact, one of my customers with a Ford Power Stroke was told by Ford, well, if you see that regeneration light come on, you shouldn't do any oil analysis for at least 150 miles of operation after that regeneration light comes on and goes off. They said that'll give enough time that you should get the oil, the fuel contamination in the oil should be down below 4%, and then your sample will be accurate. But if you do a sample that's got 13% fuel contamination, most of the other readings in your oil analysis are not very accurate because the fuel interferes with the testing process, so it really screws it up. So anyway, whether we like it or not, that is where the turbo diesel community finds itself in 2011. 2012, there's a pretty good change coming because the 2012 Duramax engine has a 9th injector, it's called. They're piping an injector back, sticking it into the particulate filters, just like they should have done in 2007, and they're moving on. Now, Dodge and Ford have not made this announcement or effort yet because it costs money to do that. But I believe that as there's more of these problems crop up and some of these guys find out what the problem that's going on, I believe eventually there'll be a class action suit involved in this. I'm not saying that I have any promotion of any such thing. I'm just saying that you buy a truck, you spend a lot of money on it, you find out later that they designed it to dump diesel through the engine, and maybe you're not real happy with that once you have a problem. So,
How does yours do?
mine is a 2005. It's before that
okay.
took place.
Okay.
It doesn't have any of that. So, what I'm bringing this up for, AMSOIL has a technical bulletin out on it to try to warn us all about it. But my customer was never informed by Dodge that he even had anything to look out for. This is what made him mad, because when he bought the truck, it doesn't even have anything that talks about it. It just says that you'll notice a regeneration light come on your dash. It just means that it's cleaning the particulate filter. That's it. That's the owner's manual. That's all it says.
Now, you said, go back to that Ford thing, you said don't do a fuel sample, an oil sample for 150 miles within the regeneration.
Right.
So you're saying that this 13% should be gone in 150 miles?
No, but it should be low enough. What Ford was saying, that they think it would be low enough that your sample would at least be accurate.
Okay.
So it might be 4 or 5% by then. There's arguments with people about whether or not this vaporizes out, whether it disappears.
Yeah.
But I submit to you that in a system that holds 10 quarts, if every 3,000 miles I was doing a regeneration system, I put a quart in there and it didn't disappear, pretty soon it'd be coming out the top of the engine. You just can't add a quart constantly and not see increasing oil levels.
But 4 or 5% increase in your liquids in the pan,
Right.
then that's just going to destroy the oil.
Right, exactly. So here's what has happened, and this is important, and for all those folks listening in on the video later, this is important. If you own a diesel, turbo diesel, that uses fuel washdown regeneration, that would be a Dodge 6.7, a Ford 6.4 Power Stroke, or a 6.6 liter Duramax made between the years of 2007 and 2011, and then for 2011 on for Dodge and Ford, but the Chevy's changing. You simply have to run oil in the normal drain interval.
Really? Really?
Unless you run oil analysis to make sure that the oil can handle the fuel contamination and continue to protect your engine, you simply cannot risk running long drain intervals. You have to shake your head and realize that when you had a 2005 or a 2006 Power Stroke that you ran for 20,000 miles on AMSOIL synthetic diesel oil, but now you bought you a fine 6.4 brand new one, dual turbo, great engine, you need to change the oil every 7,500 miles. Now, how do we address that from AMSOIL? On my screen here, we have an oil called OE. OE diesel oil. The reason we made this was for you guys, really. The only reason, because this oil is lower priced, it's designed with the best possible base stock to prevent shear back, which is one of the problems you run into with high fuel contamination. It does not shear back. It will give you excellent protection with high levels of fuel contamination through the 7,500 mile cycle of oil changes.
Is this hydrocracked, or is this the real deal?
No, this is that oil is a hydrocracked oil.
Okay.
And the reason is that you cannot survive the longer drain intervals most of the time. Now, I will tell you this. If you run an AMSOIL bypass filter, and if you run diesel concentrate on a regular basis in your diesel, you can take oil analysis, and my experience has been you can run long drain intervals and you can run one of the other oils. You might ask, how is that so? Well, remember that carbon buildup in the particulate filter, that's what we're trying to burn out. Well, when you run low sulfur diesel and you run the diesel concentrate from AMSOIL, the regeneration rate, I can say that again, the regeneration cycle is a rare occurrence.
Really?
The filter rarely fills up with carbon. The regeneration cycles are few and very far between. So what that means for you is that you're not dumping diesel into your crankcase very often.
So you're saying that the additive actually burns the diesel cleaner?
Yes, the additive makes all diesel engines run cleaner and produce less soot. How it does it is by maintaining pristine, clean injectors. The greatest source of soot in a diesel engine is when the injectors begin to not have a perfect 360-degree spray pattern,
Right.
and they let raw diesel drip into the cylinder. It rarely ever burns. It usually just produces soot. So you lose power and you make soot. So a way around that is to run a high-performance additive that's a cleaner. And this diesel concentrate is an excellent product from AMSOIL. That's not to say you can't find another one. I'm sure Stanadyne makes an excellent diesel additive. My advice is run one. It will reduce the amount of regeneration in all of these Power Strokes, Cummins, and Duramax engines. And the less times you have to go into that regeneration cycle, the better off your truck is.
Okay.
So run an additive. Now, yes, George?
And the additive again from AMSOIL is?
AMSOIL is a diesel concentrate.
That's it.
Now, one of the things to remember in these diesels, we'll segue into these additives for just a minute. The ultra low sulfur diesel, to have that title, must have less than 15 parts per million of sulfur in the diesel. And that's the EPA requirement. The previous low sulfur diesel, not ultra low sulfur diesel, was all the way up, had to be less than 500 parts per million. And the original diesel ran about 2,500 to 3,000 ppm of sulfur in the original diesel before they ever started trying to refine it and lower it. What does that mean to us as far as these additives or diesel? Well, sulfur, although chemistry gets a little deep, I don't want to get that deep. Sulfur, let's just say it represents the lubricating quality of the diesel. There's some compounds it makes, actually it's a precursor to them, but let's just say the amount of sulfur will be readily related to the ability of the diesel to actually lubricate the moving parts in the fuel injector and the fuel pumps. So when we went to ultra low sulfur diesel, we made it where it virtually has no lubricating quality whatsoever. So it's going to wear out fuel pumps, wear out injectors. Government knew that, so they required the diesel manufacturers to put an additive in to give the diesel some lubricating quality. Now, the amount of additive that they put in is called LCA, lowest concentration allowed. And it isn't much, because that stuff's expensive, so it isn't much. And what we find out is that in a lot of cases, you would not go out here and say, well, I never ran an additive, I don't have any trouble with my diesel. That's true. But at somewhere in the neighborhood of, let's say, 300,000 miles, you're replacing a fuel pump and a bunch of injectors. And you go, yeah, but that's 300,000 miles. They shouldn't have worn out 500,000 miles.
We saw a turbo go out.
Yeah, so
Because it was being controlled by the computer, which was kind of connected to the exhaust and the cleaning, the regeneration in '06.
yeah,
Because the turbo, what happened to the turbo is it kept running. It was supposed to come on and go off, come
Right.
on and go off. Something went haywire with all the regeneration shit they put on it, and the turbo never went out till it burned up.
wow. Well, the thing is that with these additives, that I would just say that they're cost effective to run, because a modern diesel high pressure fuel pump is a $2,500 to $3,000 component.
Turbo was 55.
And some of the injectors in these modern trucks are $600 to $800 a piece.
Yeah.
And you have 8 of them. So if you think that burning an additive is an overreach of cost, just lose an injector, lose a pump, and you'll be thinking about the barrels of additive that you could have bought for that amount of money to protect that engine.
Here's the story with this at Peterbilt with a Caterpillar engine, and the whole truck was under warranty, but they totally forgot to put the turbo on warranties. I can't buy the truck with a turbo warranty. How's
Yeah.
that sound?
Sounds like a convenient oversight.
So
So let me just tell you on the additives real quick, is that the diesel additives, I'm going to come back to the oil in a minute, but we're talking about additives. The diesel additives that are available in the marketplace out here are typical things which are cold flow additives. You buy those because you live in Minnesota and the diesel wants to freeze, okay? So you buy something so it won't freeze. That's a cold flow additive, allows the diesel to flow. Then you have cleaning and lubricant additives like the AMSOIL diesel concentrate, okay? And then you have some stuff called cetane boost.
yeah, I read
Now, cetane, different than octane in gasoline. Cetane measures how readily the diesel will ignite. If you have low cetane, you have to take a blowtorch to the diesel to try to get it to light with low cetane.
It's like
Now,
bunker.
yeah, so this is critical because all the diesel ignites by is compression. And compression produces high heat. So here's how it works. The compression comes up, gets this air chamber to a very high temperature, and then the high pressure injector pulses a diesel pulse into this extremely hot air. And if it pulses out right, it just creates not an explosion, but a burn, almost like an explosion. And down goes the piston from the pressure. But if the diesel pulses into the hot air and doesn't readily ignite, then it's not going to boost the power, nor is it going to all burn. It's going to inefficiently burn, and you'll have a lot of soot left over from unburned diesel,
Which goes in the collector.
which goes to the collector. So, here's the thing about cetane. And I say this from personal experience. I have a diesel truck for delivery, and I've done it. I did a controlled test, and with the cetane boost, I gain about a mile per gallon on top of, in other words, I get about 13.3 without it, and about 14.3 with it. And you say, well, that doesn't seem like much.
That's a lot.
1 over 13, right? It's about 8%.
Yeah.
So an 8% fuel increase by using an additive when diesel can cost as much as $3.80, $3.90 a gallon is a super savings by shifting and putting that in.
What is the application on the cleaner? Is that once every so often, or is that all the
No,
time?
you need to run the cleaner, the diesel concentrate should be run in the tank, every tank, and here's why. It raises the lubricating quality of that diesel to the point to where those fuel injectors and the fuel pump are now protected, they're lubricated, they're not going to wear out. They're only lubricated by the diesel. Nothing else lubricates those components. And believe me, when you've got components that are creating, well, they create about maybe 1,500 pounds or something in the fuel system, but then in the injector itself, they raise that pressure as high as 40,000 psi. So it would behoove us to protect those little moving parts.
That and the cetane.
The cetane just gives you a better burn, completely different thing.
And that runs the same, it doesn't have a problem working together.
No, they work hand in hand.
Okay.
Now, in the AMSOIL products, we've asked them this question before, and I'm sure you've heard the answer, Al. Why don't you put these two together? Some of these people like Standard and other guys, they have one product that has both cetane and cleaner and all this stuff all in one bottle, same size bottle. Well, my answer to that would be, so let's see, what'd you do? Give up half of the lubricating quality or half of the cetane quality?
Gotcha.
Because this is just simple chemistry. The volume of this stuff that's in the bottle, you cannot get it, especially lubricating stuff, you can't get a certain amount of lubricant to just treat hundreds of gallons of diesel, because you thin it down. So you're not going to get the same effect. So AMSOIL's belief is, you got some people that strictly want to run this lubricant cleaner, and they're not interested in the cetane boost. We got other people that swear by the cetane boost, and they add it to it. So we make it available. You can buy it either way.
Now the cetane comes in 55-gallon drums.
They all come in 55-gallon
Okay.
drums. But let me tell you something. You make a good point, Marty. If you own a diesel truck, you put a lot of miles on it. AMSOIL has just started to make this stuff in half-gallon bottles. They used to just make it in the pint, then you went to a 5-gallon bucket. One of the new products from AMSOIL is a 64-ounce half-gallon container so that you can take this in a pretty good-sized truck on the road and use it. It's got graduations on it, and just use this container, pour out of it while you fill up. And oh, by the way, some of these guys have 200-gallon saddle tanks.
Yeah.
So having a bigger jug to pour in there rather than these pint bottles.
What is the application on both of them?
It's 1 pint to 80 gallons.
1 pint to 80?
80 gallons.
Both products?
That's, yes. And the 1 pint to 80 gallons, you can use cetane boost out to 160. It depends on how much of a rise you want in the cetane. And speaking of that, cetane is an interesting rating on diesel because you think, oh, goodness, everybody makes good diesel, right? No. Let me tell you, you want to get good diesel, pull your truck into wherever you see the 18-wheelers lined up to get diesel, at the Flying J or wherever they are, because the word gets out on a place selling bad diesel, and those guys won't go there.
No.
So you just go around town and find a truck stop that's selling a bunch of diesel, and it's because the diesel is good quality diesel.
Yeah.
You got to be careful in some places that they just have one small tank for diesel and it sits there a long time and they don't sell a lot. It'll start to collect moisture and stuff in there, so you can get some diesel that's a little bit under the weather, so to speak.
Now, do you put something in for the algae in the water and things like that?
No. Good question, though. AMSOIL does not make a product that is designed to handle algae in diesel. Now, you can buy them. There's good ones made by some marine products.
Right.
Here's kind of the story on diesel. If you use your diesel up pretty well in a period of about 6 weeks, you don't have to worry about that.
Right.
Now, if your diesel sits around more than 6 weeks, you may start growing some stuff in it because those little bacteria that grows in diesel, they'll get started if it sits around there long enough. So what you want to do is try to, if you run a diesel and it's got a pickup truck and it's got 2 tanks, when you don't drive a lot, just let the back tank go empty. Run on the front tank and leave the one empty. Just keep filling up the front one over and over and don't use the back one for a while.
Now, there was another additive that deals with the paraffin in diesel fuel, right?
That's the cold weather product.
Okay.
Now what that is, Marty brings up a good point. It is the paraffin in number 2 diesel because it's not refined all the way out. The wax begins to crystallize is what forms the slushy diesel in cold weather. So what you have is a dewaxing chemical that prevents the crystallization of wax. It's called a cold flow additive. And AMSOIL sells a lot of that. In fact, they even sell diesel concentrate cold flow additive in one bottle. It's a dual combo bottle they sell because they were just constantly barraged for that product because people up north wanted just one bottle that was the cleaner lubricant and the cold flow they could use in the winter. So AMSOIL finally came out with a combo bottle for that. It works pretty good. So with the additives, with diesel, just remember, some kind of additive to increase the lubricity of diesel for this modern ultra-low sulfur diesel is just a wise thing to do. It's very cost effective if you can use one that will actually clean injectors and enhance your fuel economy. AMSOIL's ADF, on average, gives about a 5% fuel improvement in a system that hasn't used any at all, because it cleans it up. It really cleans up the fuel injector tips and makes it so they work like they're supposed to. The cetane, my advice to most people with diesel with cetane, run your own test. Go get your diesel, fill it up, set your mileage without it. Next time, put it in at the maximum rate they say for 80 gallons. Go run your typical, whatever you do, come back and see if you got a fuel increase. If you did, then keep using it. If you didn't, then you may be getting some very good diesel that it just isn't going to do much good to try to pop it up anymore. Because see, most of these high-performance diesels operate in a range of cetane. It doesn't do you much good on some of these to go much higher, because then their computer system will just adjust if you go too high. But if it goes low, it really hurts your fuel economy. So if you're getting diesel, which is a number 2 diesel, and let's say it's close to a 45 cetane rating, which is the top of number 2, you're probably not going to gain a whole lot by putting in a cetane additive. But they test diesel around here at various times, especially in Florida, and find it at 40, 41. That's pretty low cetane diesel, so it's not going to be very spunky in the engine. So that one, when you add the cetane to it, you'll see a direct improvement. So that's my advice to most people. Does cetane work? I don't know. Try it in your engine. If it gives you increased fuel economy, you'd be silly not to use it. If you see no difference after trying it through a couple of tanks, then it's probably a waste of time. Don't use it anymore, because wherever you're getting diesel, it's working just real good for you. Now, you got to be careful when you go on the road. You're traveling across country, because then you haven't got any idea. You got to stop somewhere. You got to get diesel. Don't know whether you got good stuff or not. There, I would just put it in as an, oh, by the way, I may need this on this trip, rather than skip it. So diesel additives, they really are worthwhile.
How does the cetane then react with your exhaust gas temperature? Is that like helps lower it so it's not screwing with the computer? You see what I'm trying to say?
No, what I would tell you, it's a very good question, but a lot of times your EGTs, exhaust gas temperatures, they're going to be a little bit dependent upon boost.
Okay.
And so you're really, the boost you're getting out of your turbo is going to have more effect on EGTs than anything else, because boost gets cranked up 15 pounds or something. EGTs are just spiking because you're pushing so much pressure and power. But I would say you could actually, in some ways, you might see your computer asking more out of the turbo when you have low cetane fuel. It's trying to boost it by increasing the boost to get the power, because the cetane is low and your EGTs would be high. So by getting a better cetane, you'd probably run lower EGTs, because you wouldn't need as much boost from the turbo trying to get the power out of the engine. So anyway, additives, yes sir.
Oil, I want to go back to that.
Yes, the oil. Let's go back to oil.
Now, you said the OEM oil should be the oil you use in the later models, right?
The OE oil, now listen, all I'm saying is you should run 7,500 miles. For me, I would run the CJ4 5W40 or 15W40 oil and just spend the money for it, because I think it's the best CJ4 oil. That's this oil right here, okay?
Now, will that go,
That costs more money.
but it's only 7,500 miles?
Well, yes, I wouldn't go past 700 miles without doing oil analysis.
So where's this 43,000 stuff that they're supposedly selling?
Oh no, that's in big trucks. When you
Oh,
can
you're
run this
talking about
43.
light trucks.
Yeah, I'm talking about just the turbo diesels.
Okay.
That these
The little ones.
The little guys with the fuel. Now, all of the big and medium trucks, they all pipe that diesel back to their particulate filter, just like the new Chevy Duramax. They do not run it through the engine.
Yeah, they explode that ninth injector.
Yeah, they put the ninth injector back there, or the seventh if it's a big 6-cylinder. They would never think in one of those big, commercial class trucks of running diesel through the motor.
this
There ain't
is
nobody
just-
would buy one.
This is just like a 4,500 GCW down.
Right, yeah, it's just that the guys driving these pickups, that's what I'm saying, they're eventually going to get mad. They're going to find out, why did you do this to us? You didn't do this to the bigger trucks.
You know that manifold they put on the new Max and the Pete's and all
Yeah.
that? That's a huge manifold that's got that injector on the back of it. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a big.
Well,
piece
and
of
also the
shit.
brand new 2011s all have urea tanks in them now to squirt urea into the exhaust because it reacts and gets rid of nitrous oxide. So it could be said that a guy driving a Power Stroke, a Ford or a Chevy around, let's say, Galveston or Bay City, Texas, they should pay him for being an air cleaner. Because whatever air he takes in comes out the exhaust is cleaner than what he took in. So he got to get paid by the EPA as being an air cleaner as he drives around and sucks in air and it comes out cleaner than it went in.
So is this cetane and this diesel cleaner, is that kind of a must-do on the small trucks, but it's a great do on the big trucks?
A lot of trucking companies consistently have run these kind of additives for years.
Okay.
I mean, not cetane, not so much cetane, but the cleaner additives have been run. Standardine's made a whole industry off of making these kind of additives and stuff. So they've been out there for years, and the big truck companies that understand the positive effects of them,
Okay.
they usually put them in there and run them. And a lot of times you go to places like my city account that I have, they have the tanks they come and fill with diesel, and they just dump the stuff right in, the additives right into it. They wouldn't dare not put additives in the diesel that run on their trucks. So the guys that have done this and done the numbers on them for the injector problems and all that kind of stuff, additives are cheap compared to injector problems. They're just,
Bell makes a lot of that
Bell
stuff.
makes a lot of additives.
And right here in Orlando.
Now, I want to reemphasize that this OE oil, the reason we have that 15W40 is so we can tell these guys who say, well, my gosh, if I cannot run an extended drain, why would I buy this AMSOIL? Well, a couple reasons. That oil will tolerate 10 or 12% fuel contamination without shearing back and becoming a 20-weight oil. So if you're going to have to put up with this fuel contamination, you need to make sure you have an oil which is highly shear stable. And that OE oil is highly shear stable. And it's priced lower because AMSOIL knows that you can't run it for 20,000 miles, so they're trying to make it priced in a range which is reasonable. But if you go buy CJ4, any CJ4 diesel oil right now, they're $4 a quart. This stuff on the retail is only about $6, so we're not talking about a real expensive diesel oil. All these diesel oils, we can't live in the past. They're not cheap now because all these requirements of the CJ4 oil require these guys to get serious about actually putting real quality additives and stuff to handle all of this stuff. CJ4 oil has to handle high soot contamination in the oil. Why? Because that EGR system, exhaust gas recirculation, it's bringing as much as 35% of the exhaust back into the intake of the engine. And when it does that, all that soot that comes back in gets put right down into the oil. It's just like you're blasting it into the oil. So CJ4 oils have to handle 2 to 3 times the soot level in the oil that the previous oils ever had to handle. That's what happened to the guy I was telling you about with the 5W30 HDD. HDD wasn't designed to handle the EGR system blasting soot back into the oil, but he didn't know any difference. He just kept going with it. That's this oil right here. Fantastic CI4 plus oil for running in any of the previous engines without an
That's
EGR
the
system.
HD, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So he just got caught in the twilight zone. He thought he was using the great oil, but he didn't realize that his new truck was so radically different than his old one that he wasn't using the right stuff. Now, all we can do, like I said, as dealers, is put the word out on this, and anytime a guy orders diesel oil from us, is simply ask him, you still driving the same truck? You haven't got a new one, have you?
It'd be
You gotta
easy
make sure
just
you
to
got it.
ask age.
Yeah, just
Year
what year is
out.
your truck, yeah.
Yeah.
And just get in the habit of just saying, well, let me make sure you got the right diesel oil there. Let me make sure you got the right diesel oil there. Because it's almost like an accident waiting to happen. It's like having a hole in the yard with no cover over it, and just wondering if you're going to step into it eventually, you know? I mean, it's waiting to happen. So, all right, so, yes.
Just quick, wait, the bottom middle and the upper right,
Yes.
what are the differences?
These, okay.
I thought you were talking about the upper right and then you pointed to the middle.
No, this HDD is a CI4 plus
Okay,
rated diesel oil. This 1540 is a CI4 plus heavy duty diesel oil. This 30 weight here is a CI4 plus. This is a CJ4, and this is a CJ4. That's it.
And the middle one again was a CJ4?
No, this is a CI4.
Thank you.
Okay, so CI4 plus oils are outstanding oils because they have the highest levels of zinc and phosphorus in them, much higher than CJ4.
Okay.
But the EPA said, in all their wisdom, for CJ4, since we now have catalytic converters on diesels, that we will limit the zinc and phosphorus in a diesel oil now so that we don't poison the catalytic converter. But I wonder how catalytic converters are really going to handle the high levels of soot that we're throwing back there, because we're running EGR into the system and we're pumping high level soot back through the system. So how's that going to sit in the catalytic converter when it fills up with soot? So anyway, but what we want to make sure we know is that what this regeneration cycle is all about, so that you guys can tell somebody if they got one of these trucks, look, I just told the guy about the regeneration in his new diesel, 6.7 Dodge, and I told him that the 2012 Duramax was coming out with the 9th injector. He said, well, then that's what I'm going to buy. So I can tell you right now, when these other guys at Ford and Dodge, they're going to have to put in the 9th injector, 7th injector, they're going to lose business, because when these guys figure it out, they're going to say, not me. I'm going to get a real truck that doesn't wash diesel through the
You
engine.
would bet Ford and Dodge bought some Duramaxes to figure it out.
Oh, no, it's an easy thing. All of their bigger trucks have it.
Yeah.
If you have a Power Stroke engine in a larger truck, Power Stroke, same engine, it'll have a 9th injector.
Medium up.
Yeah.
Here, what?
They just don't do it in the pickups.
6,500.
Yeah, exactly. So, we as dealers, the best we can do is try to advise our customers as far as the oil side, what's going on, and what they need to be looking out for, and that they must use a CJ4 rated oil. And that if they want to go past 7,500 miles, they got to do oil analysis to make sure that the oil is still in good enough shape to keep going. And if they don't do the oil analysis, we just simply have to say change it at 7,500.